All right, let's try now. Now can you hear me? You there? Let's see. We'll wait for that to go through. Hopefully that works. Is there sound now? One, two, three. Testing the audio. All right, let's try now. Now can you hear me? Oh, now I can hear myself. I need to turn that off. Cool. I think we are officially good to go. So let's get started. Cool. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a couple different things, mostly some more fine-grained front-end stuff. Last lesson we went through a little bit of Ajax, a little bit of jQuery. We kind of started at the back end with HTTP requests and routes and Flask, and we've been moving our way to the front. So now that we understand all that stuff, we're going to hopefully today deploy a very simple site and actually get it live online. And then your assignment over the rest of the time will be to make a personal site and deploy that. And you can use Flask. It can be a static site. Flask will be a little bit different of a challenge to deploy than what we're going to do today, just for simplicity's sake, but it'll all be really good stuff. So first, wanted to talk about Bootstrap. And Bootstrap isn't necessarily the first place you should start when talking about front-end development, but I find that nowadays, probably 50–60% of the websites that you visit have Bootstrap underneath. So the question is, what is Bootstrap? So as it says here, this is getbootstrap.com. Bootstrap is a popular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript framework, blah, blah, blah. What that really means is it's kind of a foundation for the front end, so for the visual aspect of our apps and sites. And it was developed by a few people that were at Twitter. Twitter uses it, and then they eventually exported it so other people can use it. So how does it work? Let's go look at some of the components. So let's go ahead and download it. So we go to Bootstrap, we'll download it. There are a few ways you can link to it as a CDN, which is what Ben showed us last time. I'm going to download it straight up, and we'll go ahead and open it up. So we've got Bootstrap here. There's not even an index.html because you're supposed to pull it into your own file, but let's go ahead and just create an index, and then we will link in. That's not what I wanted. We will add a link to the CSS just to get started. So let's do doc type HTML, and then we will add links to, right now, let's just do CSS/bootstrap .css. And let's type some text. And we'll go ahead and open that in the browser to verify that it's working. I'm going to put in my downloads. Oh boy. Can I sort this? In fact, let's move it. This isn't going to be a mess. We'll throw it on the desktop. All right, so we'll look at the desktop. Here it is, index.html, and there it is. We see hello world. Let's see if it worked. It doesn't look like it. Usually I'm pulling it into, let's see, what folder is that in? fact, let's just be, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to pull this HTML5 boilerplate, which you can download. You just Google HTML5 boilerplate, and that just has some basic HTML in there. And I'm going to use that instead, just so it's already set up. And I know I pulled that onto the desktop. Oh no, I put it in dev. That's right. It's Austin Allred. This is my dev folder. HTML5 boilerplate. Let's go ahead and open that up. And then at the same time, we'll go ahead and open up the index. All right, so this is HTML5 boilerplate. You can see that it doesn't look like it has any Bootstrap applied to it. So for this one, let's go ahead and just link the CSS, the theme, and the JavaScript directly into our index.html. So I'm just going to do it up here. It's not very nice and neat, but it should work. That's not it. Here we are. All right, so we just applied Bootstrap to this page, and it looks like it worked. Yep. And yeah, so that is, there are any number of ways you can add Bootstrap. You can add it through a CDN, you can add it through the raw CSS files. We won't focus on that. It all works. But what we see here is that if we look at this, we see some kind of default styling that's been added. If we were to delete Bootstrap, then you see that it removes that default styling. So Bootstrap is basically a really opinionated base framework that gives you a lot of different components. So let's go ahead and look at some of them. So it has icons, it has drop downs already built in, it has alignment, it has headers. Basically, it's an entire CSS framework, a lot of stuff that's already written, because writing this stuff from scratch is a huge pain. And let's look at some examples of some Bootstrap sites, just so you can see that it really is really diverse. So LambdaSchool, actually, we use Bootstrap. So as you can tell, looking at this, it doesn't look anything like a Bootstrap site. The idea is that you have that foundation, and then you write over it with your own styles. And it's a really good way to get started. So just for fun, let's go ahead and take our site. And I'm going to add a Jumbotron to it. It's over here. There we go. We have a Jumbotron. Bootstrap likes us to add a container. Let's see if I can find a container. Maybe they already added it. And this is really bad. You should definitely indent your code and make it pretty. But for sake of time, we're not going to today. So just like that, boom, we have a container around the outside. We have Bootstrap. This is a really pretty button that we could write the styles over, and it works. Let's jump in and see if there are any questions. Volume up, please. All right, let me turn that up. We are up all the way. Let's see if let's turn it up just a little bit. (10:04). Okay. So last week we had quite a few questions about responsive design and what responsive design is within the realm of web development, and more importantly, probably how to make a design responsive. So again, let's look at the LambdaSchool site, and you'll notice that if we take the browser and we make it smaller, things start to move around on the page, not just in the sense that they're getting smaller and getting squished. So right there, for example, what that is that's what we call a breakpoint. So in our CSS, we give it specific rules for below a certain width and above a certain width. And once we hit below a certain width, we say, take this menu and scrunch it up into this tiny little button. And then there's some JavaScript that lets you open it up there. But also different parts on the page, you can see that these are side to side. And when we hit a certain breakpoint, they go full width. And the curriculum down here, we can make that smaller, and that also goes full width. So how is that actually done? It uses something called a grid. So let's look here, and we're going to use Bootstrap's grid in the beginning because it's really robust and it works really well. Grid system. So scroll down here, and it shows us what the grid looks like. So, and this documentation kind of has all of the stuff that it gives you a really rough intro, but then it jumps into stuff that you probably will never need, and kind of edge cases because it wants to be really good at handling edge cases. But here we are. So here we have a bunch of grids, and this is the HTML class that you can apply to a div or to a section to make it look like that. So here we have an example, and then down here the documentation gives us the code. So how Bootstrap grid works is you declare a row, so div class equals row, and that gives you this row up here. And then in each row, there are 12 columns. And basically, it's just addition at that point. So we can see here that they said that these columns are medium 1. And that means you give them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 across the top. And that's how Bootstrap will align it. You can also just say, it's 8 and it's 4, or 4 and 4 and 4. And Bootstrap is smart enough that that grid just works itself out so long as it's within a row. So that's a really easy way to align elements along your page. You can decide how wide they should be, and then you can place similar elements within a row. So if we look here at LambdaSchool, we have 1 on the outside, so you can create an offset of 1, so it's basically a blank column, and then 1 over here. And then each of these, if I remember correctly, are 5. So you get 1 plus 5 plus 5 plus 1, and that's 12. And almost all grids, even if they're not Bootstrap, are based off of 12. So yeah. Now, the question is, what happens? How do you give these columns rules so that, for example, when you hit this breakpoint, it goes full width? And for that, we use something that's called a media query. And a media query is basically a way that you can tell the browser or tell your code to use these rules when it's bigger than this pixel width and use these rules when it's smaller. So I actually loaded up some of LambdaSchool's code so we can look at it. And this is the code that drives LambdaSchool's website. And we see here media, and that's just the way you declare a breakpoint. Min width is 922 pixels. And then there's different styling for when the browser is bigger than 992 pixels. So we can see, for example, the apply button, which is up in the top right, we make it a little bit bigger because once you get above a certain size, it makes sense to have it wider. But then when you break it down into the smaller size, you don't want to declare the same width because it takes up the whole screen essentially. So you can really easily write media queries that handle all of that. Let's see if there are any questions. Yeah, it doesn't look like there are any questions. Feel free to ask if there are any. And really quickly, let's look at some of the other stuff that Bootstrap gives you, and it gives you a lot. So we talked about icons. It gives you default buttons, even buttons with colors, and you can split them, and they can have drop downs. You can have input groups, so forms are already built for you. Checkboxes, radio buttons, buttons with drop downs. It gives you nav bars. So this nav bar up here, how it's, you have these different elements, and then when it gets below a certain size, it goes up into here. We didn't even write that. That just came with Bootstrap, and then we restyled it. You can align things. You can have pills. Nav bars are there. Buttons. You can fix things. So it's really got everything that you could ever want. No questions. I need to kill my other Slack teams so that I actually know when it's you guys. In fact, I'll use my phone. So yeah, that is the basics of Bootstrap. And to get started, we're actually going to use something called Start Bootstrap. And Start Bootstrap gives us themes that are all ready to go. So we talked about, we're not obviously designers here. We're focusing on code. We don't really have time to build out all the code, but we're going to use this clean blog right here. So let's go ahead and look at it, and we'll look at a preview. So this is just some really simple CSS that's been written on top of Bootstrap, so we can already manage it. So we don't even have to worry about kind of the default styling. It's already in place. So you can see here, this is pretty similar to what we've built in Flask. We've got a home page, we have an about page, and that's just a static page as a template. You have a post, and that's a single post. If you go to the home page, it's basically a list, as we showed you last time, that loops through all of these posts. And just to keep things simple and kind of separate it out, we're going to focus on the static side of things and deployment right now. And then later we'll assign you some homework and some resources that will let you take this blog that you build out in static HTML and CSS, or maybe it's a portfolio site, whatever you want to call it, and basically pull that into your Flask application. Because we already know how to create pages. We know how to have pages that have HTML and CSS. We know how to loop through things and create lists. So this is really what we've already built. It's just styled a little bit. So we're going to focus on getting this out and deployed, and then we'll go back and add it into our Flask blog. So we're still good. So what does the deployment phase actually look like? So we're going to show you one of the very many ways to deploy. And this is one of the reasons we wanted everybody to start using GitHub. And that is called GitHub Pages. So let's go ahead and do a search for GitHub Pages. And we've been using GitHub a lot. And what GitHub Pages does is it lets you, when you push to your remote repository, so when you push your code up to GitHub, it automatically reads that and displays it for you. And it's actually really cool. So let's go ahead and I'm going to get my own. It gives you one for free. So your GitHub account comes with one free GitHub page and GitHub URL. And that is your username, which mine is austinallred.github.io. So first thing you need to do to have a GitHub page is come up here into your GitHub account and create a new repository. And the repository you need to name your username, so austinallred.github.io. And that's how GitHub knows that this repository is what you want to use for your site. I already have one, so we're not going to focus too much on that, but it's pretty obvious. You just hit create repository and you'll already be right where I am right here. This is the next step you'll see. So in this repository, this is a step that you may not have done before if you've only been pulling down code and posting and pushing it back up from somebody else's repository, but it's really easy to create a new repository. And let's go into my dev folder. And good, I already deleted it. So we're just going to copy and paste this line by line. So echo austinallred.github.io readme md. What this does, that's just a fancy command that takes austinallred.github.io and it creates a readme.md file and it puts this code inside of that readme.md file. So there we are. Oh shoot, I should have created a directory. So let's make a directory that's austinallred.github.io. We're going to change into it. And now let's do that. So I'm going to push up on my keyboard and it'll go back through the commands that I just issued. There we go. Now we have readme.md. And to initialize a Git repository, which means to start using Git, we're just going to go git init, and that opens it up. And then we can add all our files. I'm just going to git add dot, which adds everything. Then we will commit, git commit m, first commit. And it's definitely better to copy and paste these, but those I was too lazy to copy and paste. And then we're going to add an origin. So what this is doing is it's saying we're going to add this repository that we're going to call origin, and origin is going to be github.com/austinallred/austinallred.github.io. So basically it's saying recognize that this repository that we just created is connected to the folder that we're using. And then git push u origin master. And that'll go ahead and push it up. So with that, we can go ahead and refresh this page. And there we are. You have the README here. You have an index.html. Did that accept the commit? Oh, it's mad at me. Okay. I'd already pushed some stuff up, so just ignore this. There we are. As you can see, it had an index.html that I had created in a previous commit an hour ago. So I'm going to go ahead. Actually, we're going to go ahead and use that index.html. So I'm not going to remove it, but know that we could remove it if we wanted to. So now let's open this entire folder up in Atom. We have our index.html and let's do an H1. Hello world. And we'll go ahead and push it. Git status. I usually like to do git status just so I can see what's changed. So as we can see, we've modified index.html. Git add dot will add all the files that we haven't committed to be ready to commit. Git commit m whatever added hello world, and that's usually 2 steps, but I'm just speeding it up and issuing multiple git commands at the same time. Git push origin master. So that just pushed, and now we can go to austinallred.github.io. My connections. Oh, my cache wants to do something weird with that. But if I go incognito, we've got hello world. So now let's go ahead and let's pull Bootstrap into this. Actually, instead of that, I'm going to take this clean blog. And we're going to download it. And I'm just going to pull it all. I'm just going to copy it. And paste it. So now we'll commit again. Let's see. Apparently, Mazer isn't recognized for some reason. It has to be master. All right, and that should now be live. I'm going to go incognito again just because I've been having trouble with that. Boom, we have the entire blog in about 30 seconds online. And we can go in and edit any of these posts. We can change any of these images. So it's really that simple to create a really good looking blog. And if you really want to get fancy, you can buy a custom theme at wrap Bootstrap. And so if we look, for example, at blogs, you could, for example, use this theme instead, and it'll cost you $18, but then you won't have exactly the same theme as a bunch of other people. But for now, we're just rolling with it because we're cheap and it works. So yeah, you just push something live on the internet. That's pretty cool. And using your Git skills that, it may be a little bit messy in the beginning, but you can make it work. I'll make that bigger. And that is pretty much all there is to deployment. It's a little bit more complicated if we want to use Flask. So we're not going to delve into that right now. But yeah, it's that simple to get something up and online. So the next question, we'll see if, does anybody have any questions? I'm not going to wait, but we'll come back. The next step is going to be getting a custom domain and making it so that this works on, for example, austinallred.com instead of austinallred.github.io, because we don't expect everybody to remember that. I do happen to own austinallred.com. It's obviously doing some other stuff, but we're at least going to go through the motions. So the first thing to know is that depending on who your host is, and right now our host is GitHub Pages, the rules are going to be a little bit different. So you'll just want to take your host and Google GitHub Pages custom URL or custom domain. And always there will be documentation. We can go into the quick start. So it looks like it's as simple as, for this one, we just have to say, hey, our DNS, which is our domain name server, when somebody comes to austinallred.com, instead look for austinallred.github.io, and it's that simple. There are other ones that might need a little bit more caressing, but let's go ahead and look at what the options are. So I happen to use Namecheap for a lot of my domains. I think I'm logged in already. I'll go to my dashboard. Oh, apparently they have heavy traffic, but looks like it's working. So I have a lot of domains for a variety of reasons. But let's look at, for example, let's go to buttheadhat.com because that is indeed a domain that I own. That was a prank gift for one of my uncles. We can actually look at it. Buttheadhat.com. And the images aren't working because the hosting is down. But the idea is it's a hat that looks like a butt. And here is where you would actually manage that. And again, it would be a little bit different depending on where you buy your domains. But really what it comes down to is there are a few options that all of your domains can handle. So if we come into advanced DNS, and it might be called DNS or records, host records, we can pretty easily change everything that we might need to. So what most servers are going to have is a name server. So you would add a name server and you put an IP address in, and you'd get that from whoever your host was, and we'd be ready to go. Another option is to, let's see, oh, it's going to be in other stuff. Share access, domain. Name servers. So I think I actually am hosting this one with Namecheap just because it was the easiest. And that's why it's also down, because I haven't kept that up. But you can set up a custom DNS, and the host will give you 2 name servers, and that will be 2 IP addresses. You'll come in here, type those in, hit go, and that will change the URL. It usually takes about 24 hours to propagate, but it's pretty much that simple. So knowing that, let's go back into our application. In fact, you know what? No, we're not going to do that. I was going to take one of my random domains and point it to my GitHub pages, but it's just not worth it. Because I have like 50 domains that I don't use, which is an unhealthy habit. But let's go back into our page, and let's talk about how we can overwrite the existing Bootstrap styles without doing battle with Bootstrap. So this is cleanblog.css. So this is the code that somebody would write on. This is the CSS that somebody would write to go on top of the existing Bootstrap code. So we can see that they changed the line height of paragraphs. They gave paragraphs more margin. They changed the background color of the body. They gave us a new font family, site-wide. The H6s have, I guess, well, all of the headers have a different font family and font weight. So all of this stuff matters. In fact, just for fun, let's look at what would happen if we removed all of those and pretty much just returned it to the originals. Yeah, it doesn't really look that different. Am I looking in the right place? Yes, I am. So let's see if we can even see a difference. Nope, not really. Actually, they might be looking at the min. Yeah, they're probably doing that. So this is something that's called minifying. So it's when you're coming down to really optimizing your code, all of these little tiny indentations, they're great for humans, and for computers, it's like 1 bit for each one of these spaces. So if we want to really, really make our code run fast, we can do something called minimize it, which all it really does is eliminates all of the spaces. And it would make sense that a project like this, yeah, they're using the minified CSS because that's faster. And then this one's just sitting there in case you wanted to get rid of this one and change this one. But instead, let's delete this just so we can see what they've added on top of Bootstrap, and it looks like that. And we can see this nav bar looks very bootstrappy now. This is what you'd get out of the box with Bootstrap. And obviously you wouldn't leave it like that, but for not much work, that actually looks pretty solid. So let's give them the CSS back, and now make the images bigger, text bigger, cleaner, much better. So what happens if, for example, we want to take this right here, this header, I assume, and we want to make it way bigger. And first, we're going to show you how to write that CSS in the console so we can see what it looks like. So these are the rules that are affecting it. So in cleanblog.min.css, and that's row 5, which everything in that minified CSS is going to be row 5. There's a rule that says post preview a post title font size 36. So we could say font size 80 pixels, and it will render for us in real time. And now what happens if we play around with it in inspect element, we decide we like it, or we could even do it up here. So this element.style, it affects only this exact element that you're looking at, whereas down here you're affecting the rules for the entire site. And you can check stuff and uncheck stuff and change it up and down, whatever you want to do. But for example, just for fun, we see, okay, this is the class post title. So we want to change post titles so they're 80 pixels. So theoretically, we should go in here, create a new file that's custom.css. We'll make sure that that's being loaded. And just to double check that it's working, let's say red. So we're going to make the background color red for our bodies and our paragraphs and our H1s just to make sure that it's working. I'm not entirely sure that it is. CSS custom.css. That should be working. Rel equals style sheet. It may be the case that they've just overwritten all of those styles, which would be really impressive. Yeah, let's look at this. H1. So what I'm doing right now is I'm looking through here to see if I can see our custom.css to figure why that wouldn't be loaded in. Oh, you know why? Because we're not looking at the index. I'm looking at the wrong page. There we go. So it was definitely working. The background was getting changed to red, just not on that page. And now you can see in Flask why it's so important to have static templates that you can link to on every site, so we don't have to change the CSS on every page. Because we would have to make that affect the other pages, we'd have to go in here, and that was probably post.html, and we'd have to add that in there as well. And then if we go back, there we go, it changed to red. But what if we wanted to say, okay, paragraphs, let's say, color red. It did work. Sometimes it won't work because there's something overwriting it. Let's find something that would overwrite. let's just say H2 maybe. Let's see if that works. Dang it, my point is not being made very well. Anyway, sometimes you'll try to do something like that and it won't work. And it won't work because there will be some CSS rule that's targeting this specific line of code more specifically than your CSS is. So if that's the case, this is a little hint when it comes to editing templates. The easiest way to change those things is to just add in a new class. So we can say this one is H3 class post subtitle, make really big. Then we can go into the CSS here, make really big, font size 80 pixels, and if we did that right, one of those posts, that's the one, is really big. So you can basically, what you're going to do if you're a front-end developer for most HTML, CSS is you're going to come in, there's going to be a framework that's already in place, and you're going to tweak and fix things on top of code that somebody else has already written. And then, actually, let's go ahead and deploy that. The nice thing about using GitHub pages is you will get really good at using Git, which is perfect. And just like that, you are making changes and sending things live on the internet in a matter of seconds, and it's really, really fast. So let's see. Are there any questions? How did I download the entire data structure of that website? Well, for that one, I kind of cheated because there's a download button here, and they just gave it all to me. If I wanted to do it individually, it would be really a mess. Sometimes you can just say save page as, and if I save this one onto my desktop, for example, the desktop tries to pull in, let's see, that was this clean bootstrap.html. It also pulls down all the files that are affecting it, but it actually pulled down everything that's my browser thought it needed. But sometimes that won't work because, let's see if it did. Oh, it did in that instance. Well, it's not actually, because here you can see that there are profile pictures that aren't being saved to our computer, even though they are on their local servers. So it doesn't work all the way. You can see we're missing some elements. I guess you test on production as well. For my blog, yes, I absolutely do. Let's see. At least it wasn't called asshat.com. That would have been creative. Not quite that funny. Actually, I think certain members of my family would have been pretty offended. Myself not included, but you do what you can. So yeah, that's going to be our assignment for this week. Is we want everybody that can. It's just a good practice to have a blog that you built or modified out on the web. So this blog that we're looking at, it's just 3 HTML files that link. I guess maybe it's 4 HTML files because there's a contact, but you could get rid of that and no one would be offended. They link to each other, and it's just raw HTML. And then the next step that might be a little bit more difficult, but I think you guys can figure it out, is going to be taking this raw HTML structure and pulling it back into your Flask application and letting Flask manage all the difficult aspects of it. We already saw one flaw, which is that if we make a change in the navigation here, so maybe we're changing our name to Stut Bootstrap instead of Start Bootstrap. That's not what I want. That only happened on the contact page because we only changed it on contact.html. So we would have to go through and manage all of these pages. Anytime we made a change to, for example, the nav bar or the footer, we would have to go and change those changes across the entire site. And that's a mess, so we don't want to do that. So instead, we're going to use the power that Flask gives us and some templating and make that work. And your assignment will have a little bit of that, and we'll get that out to you guys in a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We wanted to keep it short and sweet this time because you'll have a lot of work to do and writing blog posts and deciding what you want your blog to say and setting it live and that kind of thing. So if there are any questions, we'll give a couple minutes for that. And then most of the work this week is going to be in actually doing that. So we'll send out some more instructions next week that should help you figure out how to work that into Flask and deploy it. But that is the last session of this bootcamp. Unfortunately, we need to start spending more of our time with the students that are paying. But if any of you do want to do either the full-time or the part-time bootcamp that start next month, the pre-work, the preparation for those start next week. And we had a couple of students drop out at the very last minute, so there are still spaces available, and we're going to keep those available for a few days at least for the people who have been doing the mini bootcamp. So if that's you and if you're interested, go ahead and submit an application. Just mention on the application that you did the mini bootcamp, and we will, I'm sure we'll fill up those spaces as soon as we open them back up. But we want to give you guys first dibs because we feel like that's only fair. How do you save changes on the fly in the inspect window to your files? The answer is you don't save those changes. So if you make a change in the inspect window, it's temporary, and you have to go back in and make the same changes in your CSS file. There are some tools that are kind of trying to do it. I think I have, oh no, I don't have one, that will let you, download all of your CSS and try to add it to your files, but they never work. So I don't recommend them. You can, copy and paste from here into your CSS, but it's still, still copying and pasting. So yeah. Any last questions? We'll wait to see what Ben is saying. Does anybody have Jeopardy theme music? All right, Ben, you're taking too long. We might just close it up. There's a Chrome extension. You can kind of do that. Yeah. It works, but it's not pretty. Anyway, that's going to be the lesson for tonight. Feel free to reach out to me or Ben. The homework will be coming in a little bit still. We're a little bit behind on the free stuff because we're spending so much time on getting everything set for the coming paid courses. But thanks for hanging out with you guys. The JavaScript course, we're still working out the details on that one as well. But we are going to do a little mini bootcamp that's JavaScript based. So that'll be based on ES6, a little jQuery. It might be a little bit below your guys' level at this point, but keep reaching out. We'd love to keep kind of directing your learning and seeing what we can do. And we hope that you actually learned something valuable, and we're excited for the point where you can get your Flask applications live. It'll be really cool. So thanks, guys. We will talk to you all later.